Alright guys, we are on to lesson 5. We're going to learn about slope and how to graph slope-intercept form. So what is slope? Slope is our ratio of rise over run. It's also our rate. But what is rise? Rise is just the change in y. So we're talking about a graph. So we're talking about if we have 2 points right here and here, what is the difference in their y values, their height? Then we're going to talk about run. So that is us noting what is the difference in their x values. So we have this important little diagram for us. Slope equals m. And that m is part of slope-intercept form. And we talked about that earlier, I think in section 3, that m in mx plus b is our slope. So how do we find that? It's our rise over run. So we're just going to take a point like 1, 0 and 2, 1. And we're going to label those 1 as our x1, y as our y1, 2 as our x2, and 1 as our y2. So all we need to do is plug them into this formula. Our y2 is 1, our minus sign. Our y1 is 0, so that makes our top. Our bottom, our x2 is 2. We have to put our minus, and then our x1 is 1. So that tells us that our slope is 1 over 1. So our slope m equals 1. Now let's do that with these points down here. We have 3, 2 and -3, -2. I'm going to label 3, 2 as our x1 and y1, -3 as our x2, and -2 as our y2. So if we're plugging this in, we have y2 minus y1, x2 minus x1. We are going to put our y2 is -2. Our equation tells us to subtract our +2. And then we have our x2, which is -3, minus our x1, which is +3. So we have -2 minus 2, that gives us -4. -3 minus 3, that gives us -6. And here's something as a side note to learn. Whenever you have a negative divided by a negative, that makes it a positive. So this slope is actually +4/6, which can be simplified to 2/3. So our slope, our m for A, is 2/3. Okay, and that's actually demonstrated in our little blue arrows here. So our change in x they gave us was 6. Our change in y that they give us is 4, so we did that correctly. So if we're looking at B, we're going to take our x1, y1, our x2, y2. y2 is -1. We're going to subtract that from our normal 2. And then on bottom, we're going to take x2, which is 2, subtract that from our x1, which is 0. So we have a -3 over 2. And if we look at this, our rise, which is up or down, is -3. And then our moving left to right is 2, so we are correct. Okay, so now you guys are going to practice. Remember, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Make sure you label them because it's really important that the one set of points are first and the other set of points are second. Okay, so here's some conceptual thinking we have to think about. We're learning about slope. What's important to know about slope is it can be positive, negative, be a slope of 0, or be undefined. So what I like to look at is always this last arrow on the right. Is it pointing up? Is it going up? So positive slope it is. I'm looking at negative slope, that bottom right. It's pointing down, so that's why we know it's negative. Slope of 0 doesn't go up or down. It moves up 0, it moves down 0. And then undefined is because we don't have a way to explain a vertical line. It goes straight up and down, so that is undefined. Now we're going to talk about how to get slope from a table. And it's a lot similar to how we did the charts, the graphs. We're going to pick a point like 420 and 714. And we're going to choose the first set as our x1, y1, and the second as our x2, y2. So our top is rise, so that's our y values. We're going to do 14 minus 20 on top, and 7, it's an x, minus 4 on bottom. 14 minus 20, that is going to give us a negative 6. 7 minus 4 is going to give us 3. Negative 6 divided by 3, it's going to give us negative 2 as our slope. Okay, and this is a negative, so our graph would be pointing down. And then for B, we're going to take the same steps. We have x1, x2, y1, y1, x2, and y2. So we're going to take 2 minus 2 over 1 minus a negative 1. 2 minus 2 is 0. 1 minus a negative 1, whenever I see that, subtracting a negative is just like adding a positive. So I turn both of those into addition signs just because that helps me. So 1 minus a negative 1 is actually 2. But here's something that we know. 0 divided by 2 is, in fact, 0. So that is going to be our slope of 0. Okay, so that is our horizontal line. So now we have our last example. And we have our negative 3, and negative 3, 0. So this is going to be my x1, my y1, my x2, and my y2. So we're going to take 0 minus negative 3 over negative 3 minus negative 3. Okay, yeah, subtracting negatives like adding a positive. So we're going to make that a 3 on top. And then we have negative 3. And subtracting negatives like adding a positive. So negative 3 plus 3 gives us 0. Okay, so here's a math rule that you're going to need to know. You can never, 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 never divide by 0. So what that tells us is that the slope of C is undefined. So undefined means that the slope was some rise divided by 0. And if you think about that, 0 is telling us our change in x, right? And when we have a vertical line, our x never changes. So that's why it's undefined. Now on to our last little section. Our slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. And we've kind of discussed this so far. M is slope, b is the y-intercept. So when you're looking at these example 3s, we should know that m is the coefficient of x. So our coefficient of x for A is 3. And then our y-intercept is that b, right? So technically this is a 3x plus negative 4. So what you're going to do is you're just going to keep this sign that's in front of 4. And you're going to know that the y-intercept is negative 4. So b equals -4 and m equals 3. Now looking at the question B, we have y equals 6.5. So 6.5 is not a coefficient of x. So that cannot be our slope, and we know that. So it's a positive 6.5, so I'm going to make that a plus 6.5. Okay, and now we have to have something times x. And what times x is 0? 0. Okay, so we know from this that our slope is 0 and our y-intercept, also known as b, is 6.5. And here's another thing to think about. What we learned at the beginning of this section, of lesson 4, whenever we have y equals a number, it's a vertical line, and a horizontal line. And we know that with a horizontal line right up here, we have a slope of 0. Okay, for C, now what we have to do is put this in slope-intercept form. And the difference between C and our normal form is that we have to solve for y. It's y equals something. Okay, so how I'm going to solve y is I don't want it to be negative, so I'm going to move it to the right to be by itself. So now I have negative 5x equals negative 2 plus y. Now I got to move that 2 over. I'm going to add 2 and get negative 5x plus 2 equals y. From here it should be pretty easy to identify m. It's x's coefficient. Right here is negative 5, and b is our positive 2. Alright, so now we're going to learn to graph. So if you have the skills from example C, this will be easy. All we're doing is solving for y. We have 2x plus y equals 2. So first step, solve for y. Okay, I'm going to subtract 2x so that it's on the other side. I'm going to get y equals 2x, negative 2x, plus that positive 2. And then from here, we have to identify our slope and our y-intercept. So our slope is negative 2. And our y-intercept is a positive 2. So how you want to start is solve for y, and then 2. Find b, or y-intercept. So y-intercept is the point that the line crosses the y-axis. So I'm going to go ahead and draw that right now. Here's 1, here's 2. We're going to put our dot right here. Our first step is complete. So now we're going to look at that slope. So it's negative 2. If it's a negative slope, that means we have to move down. Okay, and because it just has that 2 on top, we know that the bottom number has to be 1. So our rise, or in this case fall, is 2, and our run is only 1. So we go to our point here at 2, and we're going to go down 2, 1, 2, and right once. Down 2, 1, 2, and right once. Down 2, 1, 2, and right once. And draw our line. So I want you guys to practice. You have to find your M and your B. And then you have to first solve for y, which for 9 is already done. And then you have to